We live in a time when the church is really struggling. 66% of people in America don't believe the church has any value. North America is the only continent where Christianity isn't growing. Church attendance is at an all-time low in our society. There are churches that are growing, but the truth is, depending on which survey we go with, 70 to 80% of church growth is actually just swapping around. And maybe it's because we've gotten so comfortable being on the inside that we forget what God is inviting us to is this messy world with broken and busted people who need somebody to extend grace into their lives, to invite them to hear the hope and promise that comes through Christ. But as a pastor, we get measured, we get valued, we find regard on how successful we are. If Isaiah were a pastor, or a church planner, or a missionary, we'd probably have to send him back to an assessment center. People didn't get better, the temple attendance didn't go up. He wrote a book, but so what? I wonder how often he said, man, if I was just some other place, things would be better. I could really do something. When I got out of college, I wanted to go back to New York and be a church planner, or at least be in a church in New York. And as hard as we tried, it didn't work out. I don't know why. I never wanted to live in the South and be an associate minister. And I ended up in Fort Myers, Florida, not far from here. And I was an associate minister of a church. And we were there 5 years, and those were great 5 years of our lives. We had a terrific time there. In fact, just about the time I thought, man, I could stay here in Fort Myers forever, I ended up going back to my alma mater, Cincinnati, going through a financial crisis. And I didn't even move there at first. I commuted because I didn't think I would be there, and I didn't want to live in the Midwest. I'm not much of a Midwest personality. And we ended up 5 years in Cincinnati, and just about the time I was thinking, I could really do this college thing for a long time. I love the kids and being a part of that. I ended up going out to Longmont. The church invited us, and in a weird set of circumstances, through a North American, actually, we ended up moving to Longmont, Colorado. We've been there now going on 21 years. Lately, I've been praying, Lord, I don't want to go to Hawaii. Please don't send me there. It was in Fort Myers when I got the single best piece of advice beyond coming to know Christ that I've ever received in my life. It was from a retired minister who was helping out part-time at our church. He was in his late 70s. He'd been a college president. He'd been a pastor in Ohio. He was the North American president in 1957. His name was Lester Ford, Dr. Ford, and I was 21. He took me under his wing, and I think the church probably paid him to do that. Please watch out for this kid and help him. And one day at lunch, Lester said to me, what do you want to do, Rick? Well, what are some of the things you're dreaming about? And so I started telling him. I had a long list of stuff. And some of his stuff he smiled at, and some I could see him kind of flicking back in the memory banks for himself. And some of it he just kind of shook his head. And then he looked across the table. And he said, just learn to be of value where you are. Don't worry about being of value where you aren't yet.